Name is Marcus Hall. Thanks, David. Marcus Hall, Director for Workforce Operations for Philadelphia Works, and I'm joined here by a few of my colleagues, Kim McCaffrey, Senior Manager for Youth Workforce Systems, and David Irvin, our Project Specialist. And we thank you, obviously, for being able to join us for this Bidders Conference to go through the Capacity Building Provider RFP process. We will be discussing the RFP itself, the process for applications, some of the expectations in terms of materials that need to be submitted, and then ultimately going through a timeline of next steps. So without further ado, we can just jump in. So this is the next kind of like the next RFP iteration for our Career Connected Learning PHL Continuum initiative. That is a collaboration between the City of Philadelphia, Office of Children and Family, Philadelphia Works, and also the School District of Philadelphia. So we're really excited, obviously, for this collaboration. There was an RFP that was ultimately released earlier for the youth intermediary. There will be additional RFPs that are additionally as part of this process going forward. So it's a very large initiative that we're really excited, obviously, to being able to introduce the capacity building provider into this initiative. So just taking a step back and giving you, if you're not already familiar, a little bit of an introductory as to what Career Connected Learning is. So this is rooted in the idea that the best way for youth to build on skills essential for a successful career is through direct hands-on experience connected to rigorous classroom learning and reflection. So we have designed this program, is designed to provide comprehensive support along three interrelated objectives. First is to be able to have youth given access and experiences to explore different career paths and fields. Second, for youth to be equipped with tools and skills they need to explore, set, and achieve career goals. And then lastly, youth will be able to identify and utilize their strengths and passions to inform career decisions. So this is a larger continuum that essentially spans career awareness, preparation, and launch. So where we think about career awareness, we're thinking about middle and high school, thinking about learning about work, career exposure and exploration activities, career preparation, primarily for high school students learning through work. That's where we talk about internships, paid work experiences, and then also obviously connected with employer partners. And then your career launch, which includes high school as well as post-secondary work, learning at work, connections to career pathways via degree programs, apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship opportunities, and additional opportunities that allow for young people to earn and learn for their career launch exposure. And this all built into our career advancement and retention strategy, which this capacity building provider is a very crucial part of that, because this will be assisting our providers and providing resources within the system to ensure we're having high quality services across the entire continuum. All right. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Kim, who's going to go through the RFP itself.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcus. So just want to take a moment to acknowledge that this RFP is seeking a new role within our youth ecosystem, and we're really excited, along with the city and the school district, to be investing in this type of provider for our work. Historically, each of our entities have funded this type of support for practitioners in lots of different ways. So really thrilled to get to a place where the city, Philadelphia Works, and the school district are going to be investing in a provider together. So if you can take me to the next slide. The purpose of the capacity building provider is to really accomplish these 5 goals in front of you here on the screen. I'm going to read them out loud. Right. So number 1, of course, to enhance program quality by providing resources and training to support implementing the program model with fidelity. We'll talk a little bit more about the program model as well as the different programs that this provider will be responsible for supporting. Number 2, utilizing field experts to develop and host a library of career-connected learning content to be accessed across all youth work programs. Developing multiple delivery methods for youth workforce providers to access professional development opportunities, working closely with the intermediary to assess and respond to provider skill gaps and programmatic capacity building needs. Marcus did acknowledge we have a current procurement coming to a close here this week for our career connected learning intermediary that will support career connected learning programs that operate year round. And then lastly, supporting the programmatic development needs and implementation of the career connecting model for youth workforce programs. If you could take me just into the next slide. Folks that are eligible to apply for this RFP include private for-profit, private nonprofit, government, and education institutions. This opportunity is open to vendors that are currently contracted with Philadelphia Works, as well as organizations who have not previously contracted with us. Know that everyone who applies, anyone to be awarded, has to be in good financial standing and may not have been declared ineligible by federal or state government. And then, of course, we're looking for an organization who has a strong understanding of our local workforce system, the employers in our region, and then workforce supports needed for youth 12 to 24 years old. You can take me to the next slide, Marcus. So the major responsibilities of the capacity building provider are increasing the ability of the career connected learning programs, including those that are funded by WIOA Youth, TANF Youth, and OST, to make sure that we're achieving positive outcomes for youth and youth workforce providers. The provider will be responsible for meeting or exceeding applicable performance objectives. They'll be responsible again for collaborating with that career connected learning intermediary, for supporting the alignment of youth workforce programs with other citywide initiatives, and then building the knowledge and skills for frontline and supervisory staff in accordance with the core competencies of youth workforce practitioners, and then supporting organizational development and then the continuous quality improvement through the adoption of exemplary management practices and data-informed decision-making. There are lots of different ways that we anticipate these major responsibilities can be carried out, and look forward to hearing and seeing proposals from organizations about how they would do this and what this could look like for our youth workforce system. You can take me into the next slide. This is just an overview of the required career-connected learning program model. And so these are for your year-round programs that will offer summer opportunities and school year opportunities. This is Appendix A in the RFP, but you can see here that there are required hours and required segments of skill development or placement for providers who will offer this. So while the capacity building provider will not be required to offer this program model directly, the capacity building provider will work with organizations who are providing this program model directly for young folks. Along with that, and Marcus, if you could take me to the next slide, those that are offering career connected learning programs in alignment with the program model on the previous slide, they would also be supporting programs funded by WIOA Youth, TANF Youth, and for out of school time. And so those descriptions are in the RFP and also on this screen here in front of you. The network of organizations and providers who have been doing this work currently, it's about 70 plus different organizations, but it's definitely a network of hundreds of staff and practitioners. And so we anticipate the awardee as this capacity building provider will have to work with a pretty large network of organizations and staff throughout the city. In terms of performance metrics for the awardee, this provider is going to be responsible for a set of outputs and outcomes, right? So we're looking at specific deliverables listed here on the left, and then specific outcomes and performance expectations listed on the right. I'm not going to read through these one for everybody. Know that our expectation is that we will work with the awardee to determine reporting and how to capture this detail in accordance with our metrics that we've outlined. We will definitely also determine a process for gaining provider feedback to ensure that the providers are engaging and feeling like they're receiving high quality support from this provider. Take me to the next slide. We're going to jump over back to Marcus for the budget.
Great. And I know we didn't do a little bit of housekeeping at the very beginning, but if there are questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat box. We will be we'll be monitoring that as we're going through along with the presentation. But we can definitely stop here to see before we get into the budget information, if there were any questions, any lingering clarifications anyone may have that we can address at this point. Again, sometimes if you do have questions, we will try our best to answer the questions if there's obviously a very clear answer. If there's anything that we need ultimately to get more information, we will definitely make sure that this is included within your FAQ document, which will be posted onto the website, I believe, by this Friday. So are there any questions so far?
You've got a bunch in the chat, Marcus. So first question from Tamika, are you looking for multiple or one provider?
So we are looking for one provider.
And then Jay asked, will we have a copy of the PowerPoint slides?
Absolutely. As long as you register for this business conference, you will receive the PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint will also be available on the procurement website as well. And is there an idea as of what the future roles will be for future RFPs? Lauren, can you give me a little bit more clarity? Unless Kim, you have an idea, need more clarity for that one?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great. Okay. So you mentioned at the top of the call that the CCL initiative is so large that there are going to be multiple RFPs.
Yes.
So I just wanted to know if there's some sort of like structure where you see other providers coming in. You could expand on that.
Yeah, so we do have, so as part of the Career Connected Learning rollout, there will be a procurement for new WIOA and TANF youth providers a little bit later in our fiscal year. So that will introduce potentially new providers that this capacity building provider will ultimately be working with. And then we do have anticipate a few additional RFPs for a data consultant, as well as the creation of more of our data systems. So, but as it pertains to capacity building itself, this is the core RFP for this specific role. Like primarily the RFPs that will be coming in the future will be for the actual providers and direct support staff itself.
Great, thank you so much.
All right, and we will be going through the timeline for the awarded provider as part of this next section. So Christian will be able to address that question pretty shortly. And are there specific milestones or deadlines apart from the contract and capacity building support start dates? So part of this, like the milestones and the deadlines, will be discussed and finalized as part of the budget and contract negotiations. So as it stands for when those decisions will be made, once an awardee has been selected, it'll be part of just like our ongoing negotiations. And is it multi-year? So this is a 1-year contract, but obviously like the role itself is almost like perpetual in nature. So this specific RFP is obviously to establish the capacity building provider as part of this next year of work. But obviously like there will be conversations and ultimately a plan to be able to figure out how this work is continued from years obviously after this initial 1-year stint. All right, and feel free if there are any additional questions, just Kim and David, you can just let me know. All right, so budget information and payment structure. All right, so one contract will be awarded to successful applicant. Our initial term for this contract period will be November 1st through October 31st, 2024. So a full year for this particular contract. The contracts may be amended to add one or more terms, and additional terms such as the initial term and all additional terms combined will not exceed 4 years. So obviously, like as part of our ongoing work, this is not something that's a 1-year initiative. This will be something that's providing support to the system ongoing. So once we have the provider in place, like the extension of the contract, the terms of the contracts will obviously be a part of our ongoing communication and negotiations. And this next section here, so the Career Connected Learning Programs, the capacity building provider is supported by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the U.S. Department of Labor. So the range for this particular grant is $500,000 to $750,000, or 100% essentially of the program is financed with federal funds. As part of our budget and RFP submission process, once you, if you go into the procurement website for Philadelphia Works, you will see that there are attachments for the line item budget narrative and excuse me, and the budget narrative. Applicants must allocate expenditures as administration or program expenses. A total of direct administrative or indirect administrative expenses cannot exceed 10% of your total program cost. And the indirect costs are only allowable with a current federally approved indirect rate agreement. And we will need that agreement, like obviously as part of your submission, or as part of the ongoing negotiations. You don't have to include within the submissions. And then the following proposal determinations, a more detailed budget will be developed through negotiated conversation. So as soon as an awardee is ultimately decided, there will be a more extensive budget that will be sent, and obviously they'll be part of the ongoing budget negotiations.
Marcus, you got a couple questions about auditing in the chat from Christian.
All right. So will there be some type of auditing attached to this contract? Are you talking about the audited financials, Christian, or from like an evaluation standpoint?
Can you hear me, Marcus?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, just overall, in terms of the finances and also just in terms of the contract, a lot of times with the federal grants, and there may be a one-time monitor that may be sent out to kind of look over the documents, things of that sort, interviews or, looking at the budget. So I just wanted to, every federal grant is different. So
yep, absolutely. Yeah, so Kim, maybe you could talk a little bit about that from a monitoring standpoint.
Yeah, from a monitoring standpoint, because these are funds allocated to the workforce board, when there are federal project officers that come out to audit, typically they do come to Philadelphia Works, but there's regular, I wouldn't necessarily use the word auditing, I would say monitoring that happens of finances based on how invoices are completed, and then regular samples of documentation that might not be required on a regular basis. And so the Philadelphia Works finance team will make sure that whoever is awarded is properly onboarded to all those expectations. But like you said, Christian, because it's federal money, there's quite a bit of regular monitoring and oversight that happens into how the funds are being spent.
That's what I was asking. Yeah, thank you so much for that clarification. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Of course. All right. So from a payment structure standpoint, so all the funds that are awarded, it's a cost reimbursement contract. So essentially we are expecting, as part of the eligibility requirements, for the provider to be in a healthy financial standing, because ultimately like the work will need to be obviously started, and there will not be any startup funds that will be committed for this particular project. Providers must seek approval for costs associated with the contracts. Invoices will be submitted monthly with required support documentation, and providers will be required to adhere to determined reporting for all approved costs. So this is a collaboration, again, with Philadelphia Works, the city, and the school district. This contract is specifically is a Philadelphia Works contract. So the regulations that you will be that the provider will be expected to adhere to are the requirements that that obviously like we must follow through, not necessarily like pertaining to like the school district or the city, but they are obviously involved in those conversations to make sure that we try to be as aligned as possible. And then obviously, like, just with any other federal initiative, funding for this project is contingent upon the availability of funds.
I'm sorry, did you say no startup funds?
There will be no,
okay.
Yeah, there will be no startup funds for this project.
Okay.
Marcus, you have a couple of questions in the chat.
Gotcha, thank you. All right, Philadelphia Works is the grantee, right? Is this a grant or contract? I'm curious because there's a requirement that the indirect cost rate documentation is required with the application. Just want to be sure I understand. So this will be a contract with the provider. So in terms of like whether or not it's a grant or a contract, and like this will be essentially a subcontractor from Philadelphia Works to this capacity building provider to provide this service to the actual workforce system. So I'm not sure if there's anything else, Sylvia, to that question that might not be answering. Does that answer your question?
So I was wondering about the requirement for the indirect cost rate. Usually that requirement is to the grantee and not to the contractor. even though the grantee can set some indirect cost rates on their own. I was just wondering why the requirement is that the applicant has the the potential contractor has the indirect cost rate requirement.
Yeah, so I know that's obviously a part of the finance review process. Like, Kim, do you have anything you want to?
Yeah, I would just acknowledge that this is specific to administrative costs of the provider. And if you don't have an indirect cost rate, you are going to be allowed to direct charge administrative costs. So it's not a one size fits all, that in order to be awarded, you have to have a federally approved indirect cost rate. It's just a matter of, Sylvia, like you said, if we were to use an indirect cost rate, we would have to have that same documentation for the federal government because of where the funds originate. We're holding all of our contractors to those same rules and regulations. But if an organization doesn't have that, they are going to be allowed to direct charge specific costs as administrative costs.
That answers my question. Thank you very much.
Yep.
There was also a question from Tamika Lee for, are there any MWBE requirements?
So there are no requirements, but we do have it as a question as part of our application. So we do collect that information and does go into the application process, but there are no requirements. All right, Kim, you want to go into the proposal submission and evaluation process?
Yeah. You can take me right to the next slide. So this is an overview of the timeline as it was presented in the RFP. Of course, we released Thursday, August 31st, and it's going to take us through October to review and evaluate. Your questions are due through Wednesday. So if you do have additional questions after this session, know that questions should be submitted to the youth RFP at FellowWorks email. And we will post all questions, even those that we've answered here during this session, to our procurement page on the Philadelphia Works website. So this Friday, you'll see both this PowerPoint, the actual FAQ document get added to our website. So you all will be able to reference there to see all the questions and answers. We're asking for people to submit a notice of intent. This isn't a required step in the process. What it does is allow us to ensure that we have enough people on our review and evaluation team. So notice of intent is an electronic form. The link is available in the RFP. Deadline for that is Tuesday, September 19th. So that's next week. And then of course the deadline is September 29th by 5 p.m. Eastern time. Once we have all proposals, they will be reviewed for completeness. We'll walk through more of that on the next couple of slides. Our goal is to make a decision by mid-October, and this contract would begin November 1st, as Marcus said. And take me to the next slide, Marcus. So for submissions, right, they're all electronic. They should be emailed to youthrfp@phillowworks.org by the deadline. The email should have the subject line capacity building provider RFP. We're expecting that the documents that you submit are single spaced, and we'll use 1-inch margin, no smaller than 12-point font. You have to meet all the page requirements. So know that if you submit something that exceeds the page requirements outlined in the RFP, they will be cut from your application when shared with the review team. So ensure that you are following all of the requirements outlined in the submission details in the RFP posted on the website. Know that we're expecting there are no more than 6 PDF documents. And Marcus, if you can take me to the next page, you'll see those details, right? So here are your 6 potential documents. If things are combined into less, that's acceptable to us, but should be no more than 6. You'll see the submission form and the budget and narrative are specific forms that are also on our website. So you should be downloading the submission form and the line item budget and narrative to fill out those documents with your submission. All other documents can be formatted at the provider's discretion. You'll see for things like the narrative and the technical, administrative, and fiscal capacity, there are specific questions you need to answer. You should answer the questions in the order presented. Again, following instructions outlined in the RFP will ensure that your proposal package is complete. If you take me to the next slide. Once we receive all proposals, we will ensure that things are complete and in alignment with those requirements. Each proposal will be evaluated by a reading team with a maximum score of 100 percentage points in these 5 categories. Once we review and score all proposals, we will then average out proposal scores to get to a potential recommendation. If needed, after the review team has reviewed and scored, we may require an oral presentation. So know that keep an eye on your emails. If we want to move forward with an interview, you will hear from us from that youth RFP at PhilWorks account. In order to be competitive, an overall score of 80 is going to be required. And you can take me to the next slide. Right, so again, all correspondence for this RFP is going to the youth RFP at philworks.org account. That ensures that this process maintains competitive. All of the Q&A will be posted publicly by the end of this week, Friday, September 15th. At this time, I would welcome any other questions. Hearing none, seeing none. Marcus?
Yeah, so thank you, obviously, everyone, for joining us. If there are questions that you have after this session, you can feel free to email them to the youthrfp@philworks.org. Again, all questions will be accepted through Wednesday, and then will be posted to the procurement website on Friday, Friday at 5 p.m. All right, so if there are no further questions, we thank you all for joining us. I'm excited to receive your proposals, and you will be hearing from us soon. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.